And what they make clear is they intend to tell you how you will accomplish the accretion of power to their team and the wresting of it from everybody else. And if we understand that that's what this is about, I think we have a chance of defeating it. Because what they actually mean by applying Sharia in a country like ours is destroying our government and replacing it with a Sharia-compliant state, governed by a caliph, or be subject to a caliph. Well, that, ladies and gentlemen, is known as sedition. That's illegal. Far from being protected under our Constitution, that is something we prosecute and that we must do. So I would just encourage you to think about this in that way. If we can begin now, seriously, rigorously, coherently, authoritatively, to say, this isn't about the practice of your faith as long as it is not about destroying our government. We can separate the two, and I think we understand. This lady had a question, I think. Please, so? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I'm just finding the complicity of the media, the mainstream media is just amazing. I saw a story in PJ Media, I think it was yesterday, the day before, about an Iraqi refugee who set up a bomb in the Social Security office. Nobody was hurt. But I haven't seen anything. It was in Casa Grande, Arizona. And I haven't seen anything, on Fox News, I mean, to me that's an important story. You've got this Iraqi who's apparently a refugee, religious refugee, trying to blow up a federal building.
Did you say refugee?
Yeah, he's a refugee. He's on refugee status. I didn't know. He's on refugee status. And they were saying something, but I followed up the story a little bit, something about they were trying, they were supposed to deport him or something.
Well, this is a story, you're absolutely right, this is a very important story. Not simply because it's a story about a jihadi trying to blow up a government building here in the United States. It's a very important story because we're not allowed to talk about it. The press will not report on it. The FBI will not characterize it as terrorism. If he's prosecuted, it will be on explosives and arson charges.
That's what's going on in Illinois Red.
I'm not making this up. I'm telling you what's happening,
They're not
man.
bringing terrorism charges against him. That's correct.
I know. The Fort Hood shooter couldn't be brought up on terrorism. We can't even bring him to trial for crying out loud. But when we do, it's on what? Workplace violence charges. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm trying to make this as clear as I can. We got trouble. Patrick Poole, who wrote that article, is one of our Team B2 members. He's been doing incredibly good reporting on these kinds of issues. And most especially, he's putting a light on some of these things that we're not allowed otherwise to see. And the reason we're not allowed to see it is because we are being subjected to what the military would call information dominance. By information dominance, they mean an ability to deny your enemy a correct understanding, situational awareness. Why is that important? Well, if you are engaged in a war, and particularly a stealthy war at that, if the other side doesn't know what you're doing, you enormously increase the chances of success. These people are serious. They are pursuing this war as though they intend to conquer us. We, to the extent we even think we're in a war, are pursuing it as though if we are just accommodating enough to them, if we just don't give them any offense, they'll leave us alone, more or less. You actually had, I don't know if you caught this either, you actually had the General Counsel of the Department of Defense last Friday telling an audience in Oxford University that we're approaching the tipping point with respect to Al-Qaeda. They will soon be destroyed, and then, guess what? We're going to go back to treating this as a law enforcement problem. What's wrong with that? We're not just up against Al-Qaeda. They're not losing. We're not winning. We're not going to be safe if we pursue this as we did before 9/11 when those towers came down, as though it's really just a law enforcement problem, especially if we continue to ignore altogether the civilization jihad piece of this. Yes, ma'am.
The Arab Spring, it seems to me, makes evident that the civilizational jihad goes beyond, extremists and jihadists. It's very basic now to the Muslims, especially the Arab world. I have two questions. One is, are there statistics about the number of Muslims that are coming to this country? Can I find out how many Muslims came in 2011? Are there statistics that will tell me that? 2012. And secondly, are there any organizations or wars anti-PC enough, brave enough to say, if we're really going to counter this civilizational jihad and not wind up like Europe with its ring of well, we don't have to go into it, are we willing to say we have to change our immigration policy and drastically cut down the number of Muslims that come into this country? I know, Christians are not, because of the UN's role in sending refugees. Christians aren't told they're not refugees who really are in need of a place to go, and it's the Muslims that come in. So, is anybody willing to really speak up on it?
Mark is far better equipped than I am to tell you the numbers. I think they conceal this somewhat by telling you only the countries of origin. And Mark and I were talking about before Nigeria. Well, are those Muslims coming from northern Nigeria, or are those Muslims coming from southern Nigeria? If they're northern Nigeria, they may be Muslims. They probably are. If they're southern Nigeria, they might be Christians. They probably are. But a lot of this is concealed, frankly, or at least not made self-evident. So you have to do some research, and you have to make some informed guesses, I think, unless I'm wrong about that. But on the second question, one of the reasons, as I said, that to start with, we are at a point as an organization, the Center for Security Policy, where if we're going to actually advance ideas and recommendations and policies that might stave off the disaster that I'm sort of describing for you, I believe that immigration is going to have to be a piece of that. And how that's done, how it's framed, which particular programs under the current law you go after, I mean, it seems to me a no-brainer. You stop bringing in imams who are promoting jihad. That's a gimme, it seems to me, but it's a relatively, it's small, but it's important because, as I said, I think there are lots of Muslims, particularly in this country, who aren't with the jihad just yet. The problem is you continue to have them proselytized to by these Shariah adherent imams. It's inexorable. We talked about this at lunch, that this is in fact already manifesting itself with not so much the first generation of refugees, not so much refugees, immigrants, legal immigrants, but their kids. That has to be corrected, and that's a place where I'd really like to work with Mark and his team.